On this week's mailbag episode, the offseason may be at a little bit of a crawling snail's pace right now, but there's still Padres news, including the team and Michael King not coming to an agreement on arbitration, update on the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes and why the Padres still may have a shot, Scott Servais joining the Padres as a special assistant, interest in Robert Suarez and among other teams for trade possibilities, and a whole lot more. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, for Monday, January 13th. That would have been wild. Of course, as always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Arraez. You can follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javapeno, Javiipeno. Send me all of your questions and comments, and I may answer them on the show the same way we will be answering some of them on today's show. So be sure to do that. And also be sure to go check out justbaseball.com, where you can find some of my other baseball-related writing and, go off from there. And subscribe to the newsletter. I help out with that a lot, too. I'm an editor, and I sometimes do the whole newsletter myself. So go check that out, guys. Today's episode, though, is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And getting started with today's episode, folks, is... Look, there's actually a lot to talk about. Not like a lot of, but like in a niche way. You know what I mean? So we're going to be talking about some stuff that has to do with the Padres. Not any breaking news or anything, but we have gotten a bunch of reports and a bunch of interesting things I think have happened over the past few days since we last did an episode. Obviously, with the Sheel Seidler lawsuit, that is the main thing that is looming, but there's a lot of other things that we got to talk about. Firstly, I will say, yes, everyone, I warned you. Everybody knows that we're really past the winter meetings and we're just not getting a lot of signings right now. So if you're wondering about the Padres not making a move, in fairness, right now, nobody's making any moves. In fact, from December 8th to December 11th, which is the, kind of the prime of the winter meetings, there were 4 deals of 3+ years given out. Ever since then, ever since December 11th, in total, we've gotten 6 deals of 3+ years or more. So, it has slowed down significantly. And that's unfortunate, right? I want us to get some more action. And there's still some top-level free agents available. We're actually hearing that some free agents, like Jack Flaherty and Anthony Santander, that their respective sides, groups, whatever you want to call it, their management, that they are open to more short-term deals, which I think makes a lot of sense. I like Jack Flaherty for what it's worth. I think we're kind of that he's a great example of a pitcher that, I think that he doesn't deserve necessarily that 6-year giant deal just because he had a great season. But if we're so down on him to the point where this guy might sign 3 years, $60 million or whatever the heck, I think that could be a huge bargain for a lot of teams. So I'm curious how it happens to him. And Anthony Santander is a player that we've talked about on this show before. In fact, a player that the Padres, I think, at one point might have been interested in trading for. And basically, I have come to the conclusion where I'm I like him as a player. I think he's fun. But this $100 million deal that he's been projected to get just does not make sense for me because too much of his value relies around home runs. He doesn't field very well. He's not fast. He doesn't walk a lot of stuff, right? So go check out my episode if you're curious about Santander. But yeah, so things have been coming to a little bit of a crawl pace lately, but it's okay because we still got news, guys. Firstly, let's talk about Scott Servais joining the Padres as a special assistant. Reading from The Athletic, former Seattle Mariners manager Scott Servais has found a landing spot ahead of the 2025 season. The San Diego Padres hired Servais as a special assistant for baseball operations and player development, league sources told The Athletic. Servais, whom the Mariners fired in August, possesses relevant experience for his new role. The former Major League catcher was the Texas Rangers' senior director of player development from 2004 to 2010, during which time he worked alongside current Padres president of baseball operations A.J. Preller. It is the classic Preller special, man. Servais subsequently spent 4 seasons as a Los Angeles Angels assistant manager, focusing on player development. Servais, 57, is not the first former big league manager to win the Padres minor league system in recent years. Obviously, in recent years, in 2022, months after being fired by the St. Louis Cardinals, Mike Shildt was hired by San Diego as a player development consultant. Sheel, who succeeded Bob Melvin as Padres manager last offseason, received a contract extension through 2027 in November. I don't really have too much to add to this. Maybe if we're doing pin to pin, like me going like, I'm like inhaling copium on the level of like Kirby and Kirby's Dreamland. Hey, last time the Padres hired someone who was fired by, in my opinion, an organization that is quietly not well run, the Seattle Mariners, previously St. Louis Cardinals. I think Cardinals used to be, but they're not right now. I think the Mariners are actually like a decently run org, but I think their problem is that ownership is just completely kneecapping them, right? Like they made the playoffs first time in like 1,000 years, and they followed that up by like barely spending any money, and they haven't spent like anything this offseason either. So like, I don't think it's Servais' fault. Totally cool with this. It's just Preller adding more people. Now, I do worry about that. That is a trend that we've seen with AJ Preller over the years, is maybe surrounding himself not necessarily with enough people to disagree with him, but then again, I think he's been at least okay. And it's not really, this isn't the type of move that freaks me out, because bottom line is it's a minor league type of thing, and we've been pretty good at scouting the Padres, right? Like this is a team that actually, despite what Dodgers fans on the internet will tell you, they're not a totally useless organization lately, right? Like they have improved things, and we keep seeing, despite all the trades, that they still procure some really good prospects, right? And we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if Cash Mayfield jumps up the prospect boards like really quickly by the end of the year, or I think it was their second pick that they had. I'm blanking on him right now, but really exciting stuff. Nice move for the Padres. Not much else though. The other thing we got to talk about before we talk about Michael King, I just want to say really quickly, conflicting reports. We talked about this, I think, on, was it Wednesday or Monday? I think last week we talked about Luis Arraez being a potential trade candidate to the Yankees. The Padres did come to agreement arbitration wise on a bunch of players, one of them being Luis Arraez, for $14 million, kind of as expected. They're saying that the Yankees are no longer interested, right? They're not necessarily going for that anymore. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. I think the Yankees, for one, are like just a weird team, right? Like I can't always figure out exactly what it is, what do they want, and if they want to go full in and actually fully commit to being a World Series contender. They have not been like the Dodgers. They have not been like the Mets for a while, right? Like they just don't go full board, right? They give Fried, but then they do Paul Goldschmidt, right, at first base, right? So I was wondering if they were going to do Arraez. I think it would have been a really good match, because I think they could have given Everson Pereira, some combination of Everson Pereira, Will Warren, maybe even Marcus Stroman. That was another player potentially that the Padres might be interested in. So according to reports, it seems like that type of deal is a little bit dead right now. Maybe they're a little bit too scarred by the way the Juan Soto situation turned out. So I don't know. Whatever. It's fine. We've actually gotten some reports that say that the Padres would prefer to keep Arraez. I think that teams, and AJ Preller in this case especially, do value having a different kind of player in your lineup, one that just hits singles and just, that is going to hit. He's got a 350 lifetime average with runners in scoring position. Now, that doesn't say it all, because if you're hitting weekly hit singles when someone's at second base, that doesn't account for an RBI, right? So that's one of the problems right now, right? So that could be a little bit of an issue. Third base, different story, but that's why I think that some of those numbers aren't as fun as you'd like them to be. But I just think that he's just such a unique bat compared to everyone else, that it's nice to have that in certain situations where you at least know someone's going to put the ball in play. I guess especially against, say, like the team's best pitchers or the team's elite closers or elite bullpen arms that come in, that I think that they may be valuing that. So we'll have to see how that pans out. But no Yankees trade, it sounds like. But we'll see, because y'all know how MLB offseason works. We be getting conflicting reports. We get reports that are nothing burgers, not made up, but they're like nothing burgers that aren't going to improve things too much or tell us too much about what's going to happen. But let me tell you, we have gotten some reports and some news that will matter. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. Michael King, what's going on there? I got to talk about it. Give my reaction to the Padres and him not settling on an arbitration number in just 1 second, guys. But first, let's take a second to talk about the legendary, the impeccable, the title sponsor of this podcast. That is our good friends over at FanDuel, guys. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Let me tell you, we had some game-winning drives. Shout out to the Washington Commanders last night. Jaden Daniels looking good. Apparently every quarterback is allowed to win a playoff game except for my favorite team. But no real upsets this weekend, but you better believe that next weekend is going to be cooking too. And tonight's game, frankly, too. Vikings-Rams. I could see an upset happening there too. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. 200 in bonus bets, win or lose. It's a really great deal. FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. Me personally, I don't know about tonight. I feel like everybody's, they're fading the Vikings a lot because of that last game that they had against the Lions. Darnold looked bad. But to me, you know what, man? Ooh, it's tough, though, because McVay's a good coach, but I like Kevin O'Connell. I think they get the win tonight. So if you see some things not going, if you see too many people going to the Rams side, I kind of like, I'm zigging when everyone else is zagging, I guess, on this game tonight. So, but regardless of what you guys think, go check it out. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. $200, win or lose, in bonus bets. FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing as always. Remember to go check out me on Twitter at Javapeno, Twitter/X, and Blue Sky, JAVIIPENO, to send me your questions so you can have a chance to have them read, which we will be getting to shortly. But first, last of the news. Firstly, Michael King did not come to an arbitration agreement with the Padres. It is the first time in 10 years that the Padres have had an arbitration disagreement. He filed for the difference between the two sides was about $1.5 million. Look, there's a couple reactions to this. Number one is, this arbitration system is so stupid. And AJ Preller himself, according to Kevin Acey of the San Diego Tribune, in quotes, Preller loathes the idea of a hearing in which the team has to essentially devalue the player over what is a relatively small gap in salary demands. It's a messed up system, and even more messed up is that I think there's just some weird chicanery going around because I almost always see the arbitration go in favor of the team, and that's like ridiculous. Like the Milwaukee Brewers infamously, and it was a sign that they were definitely going to trade him, the Milwaukee Brewers infamously went to arbitration over $740K with Corbin Burns, who was a pitcher that won a Cy Young, by the way, for them, and then had another excellent season, and somehow baseball was like, yeah, you guys are right. He gets $740K less. Like, it's insane, right? So this isn't a great development. I know some other people will point out, wow, of course, when we're having all these spending controversies and what have you, right? All of this stuff with the lawsuit, of course, it comes out that one of our pitchers, we have our first arbitration disagreement in 10 years. Like, that doesn't usually happen with this team. And I just think that everyone knows that it's really messed up. And the Padres have been very pro-player in this regard. They rarely go to arbitration, as evidenced by the 10 years. So a bunch of different reactions to that. The other thing that it could mean is maybe a tiny bit, maybe there's an extension that could be worked out of some sorts, but I also think I'm more side to the degree of, maybe they were just off in some ways, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that, it's going to be an absolute disaster and that they can't come to an agreement of some sorts. But I will say, a little bit of a weird season, right? This is a guy who basically, this was his first full season as a starter, 2.95 ERA, 173 innings pitched, but again, first full time tenure as a starter. So I think that there's not a lot of historical comparisons to make, I think, between these with this player in particular and Michael King. So that's going to be a little bit difficult. But yeah, it's not good timing considering the lawsuit. So people might be wondering, of course, this happens now. It's not like it happened before or anything like that. So we'll see. I think that Michael King was awesome this year, and I think that they'll come to an agreement. I think it'll be fine. I don't think a $1 million difference is like a crazy amount. I really do. I think that they'll figure this out and that it won't be too much of a big deal. But I would also hold my breath and don't expect necessarily that this is a sign that an extension is incoming, just because there's so much uncertainty right now with the Padres payroll, with the lawsuit and everything, that I just don't know if they're going to be overly committing to the future. And that's been made pretty evident so far through the offseason. So we'll see. And then, of course, because this is, the Padres podcast, we got to talk about some trade ideas. Padres have entertained interest in Robert Suarez. This according to MLB Trade Rumors. It was mentioned in Dennis Lin's article of The Athletic. I talked about this a while ago. I think that absolutely trading him would make sense. And as one thing noted, closer Tanner Scott, who's a free agent, former Padre as well, is reportedly a player that could land an AAV around 20 million range this winter. So it's feasible, as the article says, that the possibility of being on the hook for 26 million over 3 years, if Suarez opts in, has become more palatable. I remember when that contract first happened, I was like, I really do think that contract was one that was going to age better because Preller saw Suarez. He thought Suarez is very good. Let's get our closer, and also players are going to get signed for more, whether it be Josh Hader. So they kind of jumped ahead of the curve. So he was going to be the highest, one of the 10, 12 highest paid relievers, but not for long. I think that they knew that that's what was coming in. So yeah, I think he has a lot of value. I think you could flip him to the Cubs for some salary relief and for some prospects, maybe an extra arm in your rotation. We talked about Alexander Canario and Jordan Wicks, I think, was one that we talked about. We talked about him and many others. We talked about a bunch of other teams, so go check that out. But yeah, I'd be totally up for trading Suarez, especially because I am not a truther, but I'm someone who's a little bit nervous that I think that it just worries me how he doesn't get as many strikeouts as I would want. And I wonder if teams can catch up eventually to that velocity and whatnot. And I just think in general, the rest of the bullpen is so good that I could see someone stepping up. I could see you just being like, you know what, Jason Adam goes there. Yuki Matsui is going to be better this year. We've got Sean Reynolds. We've got Jeremiah Estrada. We've got so many different names in this bullpen that can be really effective. So we'll see. But at least they're entertaining the offers. There's going to be something that happens. I just don't know what, guys. Don't worry. And then lastly, according to MLB insider Mike Rodriguez, the Dodgers have a 65% chance at landing Roki Sasaki. So a couple things. First of all, whatever. But it does say a lot that he said 65%. Now, here's the problem, is that that's such a random number that I can't tell if this is just before. Like, what made you settle on 65? If you said 75, that's a little bit more common of a number that we use in this sphere, I guess, and what have you. It's kind of a little bit more popular in the lexicon, or 50%, or 25%, whatever. 65 just feels weird. I don't know about you guys, but it does point to the idea that the Dodgers being hailed as the presumptive, overwhelming favorites, I think was a little bit fraught. And I think that this is clearly a situation where money isn't the only thing, right? And the Padres, maybe that means they have a 35% chance to land him, right? So I'll take those odds. I'll take them. That's better than nothing, especially for other poor teams like the Orioles who aren't spending at all, and they should be a team that should be spending right now. But whatever. Also, great story in The Athletic around the chaos that's arising from this international free agent thing with Roki Sasaki, because people are moving around prospects and money like crazy. For example, the Padres informed some players who were expected to be part of their upcoming signing class that they were free to seek other deals, league sources said. All right, that was noted in the Athletic article. Could that be a good sign? Sure. It absolutely could be. He could go, also was noted, for the entire signing bonus pool for international free agents. They're saying teams might use their entire thing for that. And while I don't think that money is the incentive here, because otherwise he would have just waited until he was 25 and then got like a Yamamoto type of deal. For what it's worth, I think it might be 1% mattering, but in terms of international bonus money, the Padres do currently have more than the Padres, 6.2 million to 5.1 million exact. I don't get overly excited about that. I just don't think that that's the biggest part of this, but it's still worth at least mentioning, I think. So Roki Sasaki, man. And the other thing that I will talk about, now this thing I actually think is a factor in all of this, is that the Dodgers really don't need him, which is why, again, I keep saying that it's bad for baseball if a team that doesn't need this player, and also it's not a player where money is the main factor in who gets the player. It's kind of not a good sign if he still goes to the same team. But I will say that they've got Blake Snell, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, Tyler Glasnow, and then they've got a bunch of other guys, from Sheen to Bobby Miller, who started off really strong last year, Gavin Stone, Clayton Kershaw, Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May. They have a lot of pitchers, so I don't know if necessarily this would be the route they go under. I would actually be, I'm not saying surprised, but I'm just saying, like, that, I think that might have more of a factor in the Dodgers, not necessarily because they won't be able to get him, but just maybe they'll be like, you know what, we have so many pitchers in our rotation, we don't need to go full blow in this area. We'll have to see, though, because Roki is special, and they might just tell those other guys to take a hike, and they might just trade Gonsolin and May to some team for, like, their best player, because the Dodgers fleece everybody, right? So we'll see how that pans out, but nonetheless, we have hope, folks. There's always hope. There's always hope. And now we're getting into the section of the podcast where I answer your questions. I didn't get any DMs or anything like that this week in terms of Padres questions, but we did get some YouTube comments that I thought were a lot of trolling, because I have not had a day of peace in my life since the playoffs, understandably so. We're going to answer some of those, guys, in just a minute. But first, a word from our sponsors. And just like that, everybody, we are back here thriving and vibing in segment number trace, the final countdown of Locked On Padres. Your team every day. Subscribe wherever. Recently passed the 2,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. Not a big deal, but very cool. So I appreciate you guys very, very much. And also, of course, follow me on Twitch/X and Blue Sky. Let's answer some of the questions and message me on all of those social media places, by the way, to have a chance to have your questions answered every Monday. Reading from at R-A-W Rao Kasurex, however you want to say that name. Just an opinion, but these factors off the top of my head would make me second guess signing with the Padres. Number one, the legal drama. Number two, the Padres offseason is nothing but crickets. I don't know why I said number like that, but Padres offseason is nothing but crickets. Number three, minimizing payroll. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with number two, but to me, it shows that they aren't pushing to become more competitive. If they had beaten the Dodgers in the NLCS, I'm 100% positive that they would have won the World Series. Frankly, I am too these days. Agreed. However, this is a team that overall has shown growth and change in the spending department. I understand that it's a bad development lately, but I will say that it is worth it. When it comes to the whole not spending teams, there are other teams that have had that issue. Frankly, the Giants are a team that reportedly is in the running for Roki Sasaki. That's a team, it's not for lack of trying, but they haven't been able to attract major free agents, right? So I just think that take that into account, I think, is, what I'm trying to say basically, is that the Padres aren't the only team that's been weird. Hey, look at the Orioles, right? Rangers are another team reportedly, the Cubs, it's not like those teams have always been super spendy. It's been a little bit more of late. So, and hey, there's more to it, clearly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be hearing the Padres as a potential destination, right? There's clearly more to this than that. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not saying that he should feel this way, but maybe it's possible he's like, you know what, team that's never won a World Series versus team that has always been a fixture in baseball, just won a World Series, and frankly doesn't even need me. Maybe he thinks about that. I don't know. Frankly, at this point, I'm almost expecting like a random team, like the Cubs, right? Like that's kind of what I'm expecting. The Cubs, the Mariners, I don't know, right? That's just where I'm heading. I just feel like this has been, from the get-go, the way it was assumed so much that it was like 95% chance Dodgers just felt a little bit weird in the case of Sasaki, but I could be dead wrong. But your points are absolutely fair. What's it called? Then we got some other points. The Padres, this comes from at JDS3rd, says the Padres are a hot, nasty mess right now. Roki being named in a lawsuit filed in Austin, Texas must have mortified him. He's a private person and his name is now on headlines here and in Japan. I'm sure he is being inundated with media wanting response. It was completely unnecessary and unfortunate, extremely embarrassing, and an unforced fatal error. Let's calm down just a little bit. First of all, I don't think Roki Sasaki is freaking out because he was named in a lawsuit and the only thing that came up was just saying, hey, Sheel was trying to get Roki Sasaki. Like, I don't understand how that would be like this giant thing. I don't know. I just don't think that he's freaking out over that, right? Did he initially get the alert on his phone and go, oh, or something like that, and his agent go, oh, and then they read it and they're, oh, okay, they're just saying that they want you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that that's a fatal error of any sort. It just could bode, right? I just don't think she files this lawsuit, right? And vice versa. I don't think we get to this point unless Roki already made a decision. I don't think that this would happen if they were like, oh, whatever, it'll ruin Roki Sasaki, but let's file it anyway. I just feel like these things, that front offices know these things beforehand, agents know these things beforehand, so we'll see. It doesn't bode well, don't get me wrong, but I don't like the idea that Roki's so... It reminds me a little bit of... I think we have this problem in baseball, not to get too long-winded and on too much of a tangent. I think we have a problem in baseball with international free agents, assuming that they are like completely different people. And I mean that in the sense of Shohei Ohtani last year, the way that it was covered when he said reportedly, not he said, but like his camp said that they don't want things getting out or else they might hold that against teams. And people started assuming that that also included reports that you talked to him. Like, who said that they were being that unreasonable? I feel like there was a lot of assumption. I think it meant something more like, don't let it leak how much money we offered. Don't let it leak that he turned you down. That's what I think. Some little incidents like that, anything like that. But I don't think Shohei Ohtani, I just think that you're assuming so much about these guys. They were going to hold it against you if media reported you talked to one of the most highly sought after free agents of the last 20 years. I just didn't there was a lot of assumption there is what I'm saying. So I'm saying here, a lot of assumption that Roki is like, oh my God, my name was in a lawsuit, so it's over. I hate them. You know what I mean? I think it's a little bit too much. But I also have a bias, in fairness. Little bit of a break. Rama Murdy says the Eric Hosmer contract. This is harkening back to Friday's episode. Really fun with Miller Thomas. Go check it out. We talked about the most surprising contracts in a while. Rama Murdy says the Eric Hosmer contract never made any sense to me. The Padres had Will Myers and didn't need Hosmer. He eventually proved that point. Miller forgot the Madison Bumgarner contract with the D-backs as well. Yeah, Madison Bumgarner one was surprising, but yeah, Hosmer will never make sense. And you know what else doesn't make sense? Go look up Will Myers' advanced statistics at first base. Not that bad defensively. So, like, I don't understand what they were doing there. To this day, doesn't make sense. Scott Boras, you are a god. Ryan Murray also says, having settled before arbitration with most of our players except Michael King, the Padres are still going to be a good team in 2025, regardless of how it happens with Roki Sasaki. I expect Sasaki signs with the Padres, and we are going to make other moves. We'll see. I'm not expecting anything in terms of Roki Sasaki at this point, but I do think, yeah, like, this is still, like, a pretty good team, guys. So I'm not going to be freaking out and whatnot. But a lot of other people certainly are. Hope Springs Eternal 2624 says, why didn't she wait until after the Sasaki issue was settled before she did this? Also, why didn't Peter make a will? I don't know anything about the last question, and also I think the will thing is an oversimplification of how things work in big dog-eat-dog business world. I'm sure that there was some will stuff. I'm sure that things are getting thrown out or not thrown out, hyper-examined and not hyper-examined. These things are complicated, man. You know what I mean? And then some of the comments from Tony Wrangler says, voting by MLB owners to approve San Diego's control person goes down soon, and she had to do this before the vote and to bring attention to how the brothers are being very shady against her husband's wishes. It's unfortunate that the Sasaki timing sucks, but they're going to be super cheap as ruling owner anyway. They did the same thing as Dodger owners. No one on the pods wants Sasaki more than Sheel, says another person, and a PH Figler, I think is your name, and she was hopeful Pods could sign him, but I think as soon as she knew for certain he wasn't coming, she dropped the lawsuit. Front office will always know a lot sooner than the public. Roki is definitely not coming to San Diego. I'm leaning towards he doesn't, for what it's worth. I'm leaning towards he doesn't. But I think the second comment makes a good point. If it's true, again, if it's true that we're heading for a situation where the brothers are going to try and relocate and bring the Padres back to what they were pre-Preller, where they're just a team that maybe once in a while you get a 3-year, $30 million deal, that I think it's absolutely worth it in the long run if you were to miss out on a Roki Sasaki, and that this would take precedence and being like, I got to do this before the vote is filed and whatnot. We just don't know, guys. We don't know. And while I know it's tempting to side with Sheel, I will say that there have been reasons to side with Sheel that we've seen, that us normal people can see, right? With the lack of spending ever since Peter passed, right? With all that, trading Juan Soto, doing all these sort of things, and how quiet this offseason has been, it does move to her side. But again, these are all allegations and it's very complicated. So I have to see how it goes. Very, very complicated and frankly, pretty sad situation that we've got here. Moving on, though, to the next comment. I adored this comment, for the record. Mr. One Stat Cat, as a Dodgers fan, I don't think you clowns will land Sasaki. Thank you for saying I'm not biased, right? I'm an unbiased Dodgers fan. I don't think you guys are going to win. It's just funny when people do that. In general, I think we need to stop with the as a blank. You know what I mean? You don't have to preface what your fandom is sometimes. I think it's weird. Not all the time. But sometimes it's weird. It's like, oh, wow. Next week. As a Ravens fan, I think the Bills are, like, really not great, man. I think Josh Allen shouldn't win MVP. Like, thank you. Thank you for doing that. You got to get your house in order. You can barely pay your current players. Personally, I see Sasaki going to a team like the Cubs, the Yankees, or yes, even the hated Giants. I can see that too. My thing has been just no Yankees or Dodgers or Mets, frankly. I just think it's better if the player that money isn't the main factor, that they don't go to the teams that usually use money to get players. I just think that would be bad. But yeah, it's not looking great, man. More Dodger fan comments, though. Subaru says, maybe the Padres should build a time machine and not put a crying Kershaw meme on the Jumbotron. Ha 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 ha. Okay, this is like a year ago now. I don't know why we're getting the... Why does everyone get so soft? It was just a joke. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand this. Like, I don't get why all of a sudden. I don't like it when I think fan bases decide what is soft and what isn't soft. You know what I mean? Like when it happened to us, it was okay. When it happened to you guys, no, you were overly sensitive. I don't know. I just felt like it was a dumb meme that the broadcast did. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, or not the broadcast, but the stadium crew did, or whatever. Like, it was fine. I just don't understand why. Like, oh, so that's when we messed up. This idea that like karmic forces hated the team that's never won a World Series and has been poor for a while, whose owner passed, right? And they decided, you know what? You guys can't win because you made one joke about Clayton Kershaw one time. So let's relax and stop hyperinflating that. Next comment, though, going from Alex Padilla, speaking of the sensitivity. You know you want to say you guys were the victims with beer thrown at Profar, which I don't agree with, but to act like Profar didn't start it by taunting the fans in the most egotistical and obnoxious way is laughable. That's what started it all. He doesn't do that. I promise you there is no beer thrown. Plus, he got sensitive when a ball was thrown back into play that didn't even hit him. So 2 things. Number 1, I really need baseball fans to understand that when you make comments like this is why other sports laugh at you. Taunting the fans as if he flipped the bird, mooned the entire fan base, and then went on TV, cursed, and then threatened a fan's life. I don't understand this idea, and this is the 85th time we've talked about this, that fans are this innocent, innocuous group. Have you ever been to a sporting event? Literally ever. They're always like, boo, and all this stuff. So God forbid a player, and I'm not saying that like you should or shouldn't do it, but acting like, okay, so now we get to break the rules because a player just responded. You think no one was saying anything at Profar? I'm not saying in a like insidious way, but you think they weren't talking smack too? So he did it too. Every other sport, nobody talks about this, right? Nobody's like, you know what? You know what I think? Ron Artest was being ridiculous, and he was going at it with fans a little bit. You know how competitive juices are. So they're allowed to throw beer at him now. Incredibly dangerous and an awful precedent to set. I don't understand this. I've never understood this idea that fans are just completely innocent, right? You shouldn't do it, right? You shouldn't be throwing stuff at people. I thought that was obvious, but I guess today, no, it's not. Whatever. What else we got here, though? It's just insane. At RichJH9 says, Sheel Seidler doesn't live in San Diego. She resides in Austin, Texas. That's why the lawsuit was filed in Texas. Miss San Diego, not so much. She's the same type of carpetbagger as the Seidler bros. Again, agreed with you on the first part of that, but let's relax and stop assuming one way or the other. I don't want to assume she's a carpetbagger. Look, they're rich people. You know how rich people are. But I'm like, let's not assume that they're worse. The brothers are worse. That she's worse, whatever. All we know is the allegations are very scary if you're a Padres fan, especially when the buzzword relocation is used, right? So we'll just have to see. We'll have to see how these things pan out, but we don't know one way or the other. But I do agree with you on the idea. Now, I will say the one thing with her is she actually shows up at the games and has been more involved, I think, than we can say. A little bit of a Hosmer and Jackson Merrill comparison. You know what I mean? Jackson Merrill's already taking pictures with fans and stuff. I never saw Hosmer do that once. I think that's where we're kind of at right now. Brandon Evans, 1306 says, bro, I hope they move the team to Utah. For me, that would be a dream come true. You'd be surprised. I think Utah is only second behind Vegas from getting a team. Utah's a lot bigger than most people realize. The Utah Padres sounds awful, man. I'm sorry. I don't mean that to like be mean or anything, but that sounds rough, man. I'm scared about that. But who knows, dude? I don't know. I mean, hey, good for you though, man. I know that it can be weird out there in some of these states with blackout restrictions and whatnot. Still appreciate you following the show and whatnot. And if they did move there, then congratulations to you, good sir. But at least you have the Jazz, right? They're okay, I think. Sometimes. They're weird. Weird team. At Silas Robert Shaw 8122 says, it wouldn't surprise me if some of the Seidler family was Dodger fans. If I am not mistaken, they are part of the O'Malley family who owned the Dodgers for decades. Thanks for covering this, Javi. It's been a weird, suspicious offseason with the Padres being so quiet. Not expecting Preller's first offseason or anything, but the news is total silence. First offseason being that Craig Kimbrell, Justin Upton year, for people who don't remember. I don't think this feud is helpful with Sasaki. It may have just tanked the Padres' chances. If it turns out this is all BS and Sasaki goes to the Dodgers, Sheel will probably become the new Spanos figure in San Diego. Speaking of the Spanos, go Bolts. It's healing with such a quiet offseason. Yeah, the go Bolts part, that didn't age well, did it, Robert? Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm in pain too. And I hate life. What can I say? I do agree in a lot of ways, but again, I have a hard time believing that someone who was part of and trying to recruit Roki Sasaki would have done this if she had a choice to. You know what I mean? I don't think she was just like, you know what? I'm going to ruin the chances for signing this player. I just don't see that. And I would think that if that was true, you would know that a lot of people, that would not turn public opinion in your favor, right? So I just don't know. I think that these things have been decided already. I could be totally wrong, but whatever. And hopefully it doesn't become the new Spanish figure. My God, that would be bad. Last comment, though, a little bit of a nice one to end it. At Ido Marpez 1840 says, hey, Mr. Reyes, please. Mr. Reyes was my father. But I just wanted to tell you that it really, really sucks this is happening with your team. Baseball doesn't need this. I just hope the Padres are able to sort things out without being that Padres, right, from back in the day. The rivalry that was growing was great for the sport. I agree, and I think most people agree too. I know Dodgers fans that agree as well. It stinks. The lawsuit really feels like it kind of... It gives like an aha moment to how we felt about this team the past few years in terms of payroll, in terms of chickening out on certain signings and whatnot, and being radio silent. I think it does explain a lot, I think is where we're at right now. And it stinks. And oh, wow, Mike McCarthy fired by the Cowboys. The Cowboys actually made a good move. Dang it. It was so much more fun making fun of them. Anyway, live breaking news here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Mike McCarthy out as head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. But everybody, next episode, don't know exactly what we're doing next week or this week. Might be talking with Millard again. Might be getting some breaking news this week because they did say January 15th might be around the time we get the Roki Sasaki news. So, of course, I will talk about that. We'll report about that. Michael King arbitration, any of the trades that happen. But we are in a little bit of a slow phase. But that doesn't mean here on Locked On Padres we're slowing down. 3 episodes a week, usually Mondays, or I should say almost always Mondays, and then the rest of the week to be sorted out. We'll see what happens. I'm very curious. I think this could be a week in which we get something. I think. Also might be doing a crossover Locked On A's about Moneyball soon. Because why not? You know what I mean? It is the offseason. So until that next time, everybody, remember to send me your questions, comments, or what have you on YouTube, at Javapeno, on Twitter/X, and Blue Sky. And until that next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.